Hello and welcome to Sensei Podcast. This is Manos Brilakis discussing with leaders in the field of CTO and complex PCI. Sensei means teacher or master in Japanese. The goal of the Sensei Podcast is to help you learn and improve in CTO and complex PCI so that you can become the best that you can be and offer your patients the best possible results. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sensei Podcast. It is a great pleasure to introduce our guest today, Dr. Wanamaker from the University of Michigan, great city operator, great friend. Again, thank you so much for being with us today. Very excited to learn about your journey in becoming a CTO and complex operator.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be invited here, and looking forward to talking.
Wonderful. Well, maybe we'll start from the beginning. Did you always want to become a cardiologist and an interventionalist, or?
I think originally I wanted to actually do pulmonary and critical care when I was a medical student and then early in residency. And I think a lot of it was that I was intimidated by cardiology. It was one of the areas of medicine that I was weaker on, and that's sort of like a consistent theme where I initially strayed away from it. But when I realized how complicated it was and how much it was something that you could never truly master, given its complexity and the breadth. That's what drew me more and more toward cardiology. And then interventional was sort of the exact same way. And now here we are, in CTO and complex PCI. So it's like a consistent theme of things that are complicated, difficult, evolving, that I think eventually I've sort of found my way to. So it wasn't something that I sort of knew right away that this is what I wanted to do, but I kind of found my way there. And then looking back, it's not as much of a surprise.
So you're thriving on complexity and trying to make the more complicated things less complicated.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. And I think some of that is because, I know that it's going to be something that's lifelong, that it's not something that where I'm going to get, 5 years down the road, like, well, I've got this now. And you look at people like yourself and some of the other experienced operators that are here at this meeting that are still debating and trying to figure things out and the different opinions. And you realize how much there is to grow and how much you can master it, but you're never truly conquering it. And so I think that's just so interesting. And it's a gift that kind of keeps on giving.
Now, for some people, it can be a turnoff, right? Because some people, have a little more defined limits that you're working. Although, intensive care also can be fairly intimidating in terms of the breadth and the complexities.
Right.
But clearly you've found the passion. Now, why do CTO and complex and not just do regular intervention and live a better lifestyle, go home a little earlier every day, don't have the stress?
I probably think about that once every week or once every 2 weeks. And I think some of it has to do with the way that I was raised. And so my parent, I was an only child, and nobody in my family had gone to college, but my parents were very big on, you've been given certain gifts and everybody's been given, certain aptitudes. And the only way that you can fail is by not maximizing that, not trying as hard as you can. If you shy away from something that you feel like you're meant for, if you are, doing something just because it's comfortable or this is a nice lifestyle, that's not, what you're here on this earth for. And the other aspect was my wife, actually, which was a bit of a surprise because we had, throughout this journey, we had sat down and talked and, considering, general cardiology, or maybe just doing something that was maybe a little bit more lifestyle oriented. She just kind of stopped and, we were thinking of having kids at the time. And she just said, look, I see how happy you are even on long cath lab days when you guys have had a difficult, complicated case. And I see the way that you come home versus the way that you come home on other sort of 9 to 5 days. And so based on that, I think the choice is pretty clear. I'd rather have you be happy and fulfilled. And so that was a huge push too, when you have a partner and a support person like that. So that was wonderful, some reinforcement that I'm doing the right thing.
So the things fell in place, so to speak, in multiple ways, initially and further on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Are you from Michigan originally? Was it always where you've been?
So I grew up in Southeast Michigan, suburb outside of Detroit, and had never really left the state. And then I actually, and that was my world. We traveled a little bit, but not much, and sort of a blue collar background. And then met my wife in undergraduate at the University of Michigan, but I got rejected from the medical school. And I was crushed because that's where I was gonna stay, and that's where I was gonna set my life up. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I moved out to Baltimore, ended up going to medical school and residency at Hopkins. But just the way that it shifted my worldview on so many things, living on the East Coast, experiencing so many other things, getting exposed to that world out there, and then coming back eventually, that was a great experience for me. So I kind of returned home after 9 years, and she's from there too, so it was very much a return home for both of us. I hadn't expected to, but I fell in love with the people in the program there and the opportunity that we have, and so then did fellowship there, and then now this is my 4th year on faculty. So
that's perfect. And then you didn't do a CTO training, so to speak, but you learned on the job, which is what most people are doing in general. But actually in the podcast, we have very few people who follow that pathway. So I'm excited to hear how easy or difficult it was for you to follow this pathway, and how did you make it work?
Yeah. So I would say that that's partially true. So my program director, who's still program director at Michigan, Dan Moniz, was actually doing quite a few CTOs, but there was no sort of dedicated fellowship. It wasn't something that he was sort of advertising, that sort of thing. And so during my 3rd year of just general cardiology fellowship, I had a bunch of time to do echo and some other electives. And I was just so bored by it, and I just hated it. And this was on Thursdays, so I would come down and just start scrubbing CTOs with him. And actually, he was doing some pretty cool stuff that I didn't see and wasn't even aware of in other days and other cases. And so we have sort of, I give him a lot of credit because he was kind of sticking it out on his own there. And at the time, the environment wasn't maybe as supportive of some of the things that we're doing now, but we've been able to kind of grow together and challenge each other in this journey. So it's not like I'm sort of setting up shop alone without somebody supporting me. Somebody was already, somebody was teaching me retrograde, that sort of thing. Was it a formal chip year? No, but it was at least somebody who had my back as we kind of blazed this trail together. So that was a key arrangement. There was somebody always in my corner. And that also helped me network, with some of the OGs to get tips and tricks. And the other thing that was really helpful too is when I took the job, the reason that I stayed was they basically asked me to stay on and work with Dan and try to grow the program. One of the stipulations was that they would support me packing up shop and leaving for a week or two here or there to go work with people, go out to Seattle for a week or two, go here and there and learn from other people. And they were supportive of that from funding and time. So that was key.
Perfect. So, but again, it's good to have the opportunity, the potential, but from potential to reality, there is some work in between. So how were you able to, again, get to know people, get to learn from other people, and implement it in what you do in your practice?
Yeah. So I think that, especially the young operators, but I think even with like some of the senior operators, like in this space, people are like actually incredibly accessible. So like when I started, if you told me that I would have the chance to, like if you came to me 3 years ago and said you'd be sitting on a couch with Manos talking about your journey or some of the stuff that you're doing, I would have told you that's crazy. That's somebody that I would like look at from a distance. But it turns out that if you're serious about this and you want to grow and you want to learn, that it's actually quite easy to network with people because everybody shares the same interest and passion. And so there are no sort of ulterior agendas. It's not this sort of exclusive club that you have to be in. If you're really serious about this space, you'll be able to make the connections. And so it was literally just sending Bill an email saying like, hey, I'm very interested in this. We're doing some cases, and then having him reply and that, have that shock, be like, oh, come on out, we'll do cases together. And then that's it, no, nothing beyond that. Just somebody lending a hand, with really nothing in return. It's been amazing, how generous people in the field have been. And then you have other people that proctor and do, other industry sponsored, courses and that sort of thing. It's just so helpful.
Now, in terms of learning, what was the hardest thing for you to learn in terms of the complex world? Was it the manual skills, the equipment, thinking? I mean, what were the things that you found the most challenging?
I think it is bravery in dealing with complications, potential complications. So if you didn't train at, a place that had a dedicated chip fellowship and wasn't seeing perforations, at, whatever volume you'd see them at a place that was doing a certain number of cases, then, you can theoretically know how to deal with these things. But then actually in practice going through that, it is another matter. So getting some of those underneath your belt and seeing more of those things, I think is difficult initially because you don't know how you're going to react. From a cognitive and technical aspect, it's a little bit easier because you have all these people in the network that you can bounce cases off of and that teach you how to think about these cases, and then a partner that thinks about cases really well too. But it's sort of the nitty-gritty of dealing with some of these more complex cases and some of the things that can happen as a result. So and again, that's where you lean on your network. Like, look, here's this perforation that I have, we reversed, what would you do? And going through that and kind of getting other people's perspective because you didn't see 50 of them during your fellowship.
Yeah. And how do you bounce back from this? So everyone has their own way of dealing when bad things happen, which inevitably will actually, with or without CTO, but for CTO, obviously will happen at a higher frequency. So how has been your approach to bounce back when something goes wrong?
Yeah, I think the way that we do it is we recap it there sort of like just after, just so we don't sort of pack up and leave and the staff's just kind of left bewildered, because sometimes recapping it with the staff is really helpful because it could be like a teaching moment for everyone. But often I find that I'm not like in a great headspace to process a complication immediately because I'm actually like way too negative. And then the next morning when I think about the case and the decision making, I'm like, I could see how that happened. This is what I would do differently next time. But it wasn't, we didn't do anything crazy and it wasn't sort of like a huge mistake, so viewing it from a different lens. And honestly, it's tough because early in my career, and I'm still early in my career, I would take that feeling home, and then having, kids and a wife that, obviously my kids have no idea what I do. And then, my wife is not in medicine. So as much as she tries, she can't understand. But in any event, you don't want to take that stuff home with you anyway. And so learning to kind of having to compartmentalize it and then come back to it the next day or the next week and kind of talk about it with colleagues and try to learn and grow from it as opposed to just letting it destroy you. But it's tough because you can have 10 like amazing victories, post-cabbage circ that you failed the first time and then you get it. And then you have this complication. It's almost like the one complication deletes those like 10 victories, in your balance sheet. And that's really, really hard to deal with. And so I think you also do it by, we have a text string of, 8 other people that are doing the same thing. And we were sharing all of our complications to kind of lift each other up, but then we realized that we also needed to share victories too. And so we share it all and it's not just yours anymore. And it turns out that actually somebody else had a similar case 6 months ago, and then you feel a little bit better.
Perfect. And how did you get yourself and the other people more into this mentality that yes, complications will happen? Because I know some places, I don't know how Michigan is, but some places can be very complication averse. Some others can be a little more open to the possibility, especially when you're tackling more complex cases.
Yeah, I think it's we didn't go sort of like out of the gate, being very aggressive. And we're still, I think careful because we are growing the program and growing the reputation of the program, and people are referring and that sort of thing. And so we're very mindful of, when you're starting out, of setting the tone and gaining trust of people, right? And so, I think that from a complications perspective, once people see the cases that you're able to do and the people that you're able to help, referring docs, et cetera, once you've built up a little bit of goodwill, and that's that, a couple of patients that have been told that there's nothing can be done, people that have been turned down, somebody that the surgeon turned down, okay, that surgeon will have no problem helping you out, months down the line if there's a complication that they need to address. And then from a referring perspective, they know how many patients that you've helped, that they referred to you, that when something does happen, they say, look, I appreciate it. You're the person, you're doing some, and we had a conversation like this a month ago where I felt really bad and I dread talking to the referring docs about either a failure. And they said, what do you feel bad about? I asked you to do this and you're the only person who's willing to try. So, this is going to happen. And that was like actually a really uplifting conversation because they sort of get it and you have that conversation, and it's helpful.
So switching gears a little bit, how do you keep yourself in good shape because it's the demanding job, looks like you have young children at home as well.
Yeah.
So how do you make this balance work?
Yeah. I don't know that I am making the balance work. No, it's super tough, and you have to pick like 2 or 3 things that are super important to you, and then recognize that you can't do it all. And so I was actually rounding in our ICU. I was doing this, I was doing that, and part of the advice that was given to me when I started out was just say yes to all these opportunities. And then you realize that you have to pick the things that are truly important to you, and that if you want to be in this space and you want to truly grow and improve, this isn't just something that you kind of like do as a hobby here and there. It's something that you need to fully commit to. And then it's the same way with like the things that are important to you personally. Like I can't follow hockey, watch NFL games, be there for my kids, work out, all these things, unless, I have 4 people that are hired help. And so it's just completely impractical. And you have to start trimming things down and literally make a list of like what's important to you. And there've been times when we've needed to adjust that, as a family, where your priorities do get, a little bit out of line, or you have a particularly couple busy weeks in the cath lab, and you have hopefully a spouse or a family member who can say like, look, I think you're veering a little bit this direction. So I rely upon my wife for that pretty often, and she's helpful.
And then do you find time to exercise or do other things to relax?
Yes. So, I don't know about relaxing yet. We'll see when the kids are a little bit older, but, from an exercise perspective, me and a couple of my other colleagues, belong to, a gym that has a trainer, and we go usually around like 5:30 or 5:45, and they know, actually everybody's super happy because they know that there are cardiologists there, and we show up, we get to do our thing, and then we're out of there, and it's kind of like time for us to be together too, to talk not about cases, just about stuff that's going on in our lives and that sort of thing. And so we usually do that about 3 times a week, and that's kind of a structured time, and we can get in plenty of time to start cases, and so that's enjoyable. So try to be very, very regimented about that and view it as like sort of like a requirement in a way that still, to me, it's enjoyable, but because these things, if you don't sort of like schedule them, and if you don't make them a priority, like we were talking about, they just will completely fall by the wayside, and you'll be fully consumed. At least that's the way that I operate.
Perfect. And then, do you get stressed out at home? Do you bring the work home, so to speak, after a tough day with complex cases?
Yeah. I did a lot early on. And then I actually had a heart-to-heart talk with Bill Lombardi about this. And this is before I knew him really well, and I don't even remember how it came up. And I just saw that that was like completely unproductive. It wasn't helping anybody, wasn't getting a whole lot done. Thinking about it wasn't really changing anything because it wasn't even a productive thought process or case review. I was just dwelling, and it was affecting so many other aspects of my life. So now I try to be really, really strict about compartmentalizing when I walk in the door. And I think kids help with that too, you know? And so, yeah, it's something that I'm doing better at now. And some of it comes with experience, I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
How do you have any favorite movies or any favorite books?
So my favorite movie is it's an oldie now, but Good Will Hunting with Matt Damon. Loved like early Matt Damon, and watched it a bunch of times. And it was something about this guy who's like in his comfort zone in his own little world, and affected very much by past traumas and not knowing who he can trust, and then basically like meeting somebody who changed his outlook on life, and then eventually starts taking chances and realizing his full potential. I don't view that as like a metaphor for me. I just thought it was like such a great movie with the acting and Robin Williams and everything. So it's by far my favorite movie. It will always hold a special place in my heart. Favorite book wise, I think this is going to sound funny, but Moby Dick is one of my favorite books. And I just think the writing is so good. And also, there are so many themes depending on what's going on in your life. There's the theme of Ahab being obsessed with the white whale. And sometimes there's you see a little bit of that with maybe your thought process in the complex coronary space, and just the monomania and just the sheer obsession of Ahab. And then there are other times when Melville's discussing like just commenting on like the absurdity of life and just like how this is all a big joke. Don't take it too seriously. And so there's just so many different lines and spots in the book that for some reason they just really resonate with me. I actually don't read books. I listen. If I try to read a book, I will fall asleep instantly because of sleep debt. So I only listen to audiobooks. But it turns out that there's so many opportunities, like to the hospital, from the hospital, to the gym, from the gym. When you add all that up, and if you're running the audiobook, you can actually get a ton done, or a podcast or whatever. So I discovered that actually in medical school, and I've just been continuing it, and I get at least one a month, and that's my regimen. So.
Well, this is perfect. So how many hours do you sleep?
I don't know so I probably get about 6 hours of sleep a night, 5 to 6. It depends. That's the reality of I think doing like all the things that I want to do, and then and also having little kids and dealing with that too. So lots of aspects, and also the academic, and obviously U of Michigan is a great place. So I'm sure there's a lot of teaching, education, research going on. So that takes its toll as well. Right.
What are you most excited right now from the things that you are doing?
I think I'm really excited because, we're here at CTO Plus. And so every time I walk away from this, you're invigorated by a bunch of people that are doing really amazing things, but also having the same struggles that you are. And so there's a lot of solidarity in that. And I come away from this meeting thinking, wow, we are like on the right track. And not only are we on the right track, but there's a lot of other people that are out there that are with us. And, we're not alone. Because sometimes when you go back to your institution, you go back to you're the person or handful of people that are doing the complex work in the lab, and that can at times be like really isolating. But when you come from a meeting like this, you know that there are so many people out there dealing with the same things, and that could potentially support you. And so I think that's super exciting. I'm always excited around this time because this is like my fourth class of fellows. And right around this like January, February, like the days start getting longer, and it's like their skills start to really blossom too into like independence. And so that's like an exciting time. And it's also like a great time to be in attending, because you could like, you kind of relax a little bit more. And so it's always a good time of the year.
So again, you've done great work on the program, everything else. What are the things that you're most proud of in both professionally and personally as well?
Yeah. Well, um, professionally, I don't think it's like a metric or a program or anything like that. I think it's like I have some really, really boring clinic days where it's just a bunch of people that are coming in. I call them like old friend days, where they don't need anything done. They're actually doing fine, but they just want to come and check in with you like once a year. And they're just like so happy and they love you and they're just so thankful and appreciative of what we can offer them and how we've helped. And so those days, they're some people view them as like boring, but like for me, they're like the best days because it's just a parade of really, really thankful people. And those days like recharge your batteries in a way. Because it's just happy person after happy person who, are really thankful to have had their quality of life improved. And that's like really, really uplifting. And then I try to hold on to those days and be proud of them for when times are really tough or we have failures and that sort of thing. Now, personally, by far, I'm like the most proud of my family. Like, I am most proud of the fact that I think, and you might say he would say this, but I think that despite doing what we've done and what we do, we've still like been involved in our kids' lives. But I mean, me and my partners, that we've all agreed to maintain balance and also be good people in our community and be involved. And so I'm proud of that too. It's a little squishy, a little nebulous, but it's something that I feel really strongly about. So,
how many kids do you have?
2.
And how difficult is keeping up with them after you come back tired from work?
Yeah, no, it is. It's actually the most tiring part of the day. Because so what I try to do is I try to get home before bedtime every day, just so you can play with them for at least an hour or half hour, that sort of thing. And then bedtime's kind of like our special time to read books and that sort of thing. And that to me is extremely, extremely important. And I grew up in a household. My dad worked nights often at a job, and so but they always made a point to do that too, even though the schedules were always off. And so, that's I think the most important thing, and also like super exhausting because like I'm already on negative energy reserves, and then you've got to be like on and dealing with all kinds of things at bedtime, and it's crazy. So
how do you see yourself in like say 5-10 years or down the line?
Mm-hmm. So I one of my goals and one of my dreams is to be the program director, and for us to one day evolve into having a real structured CHIP fellowship. And so I think that's a really good medium term goal, and then eventually potentially moving into the program director position. This year I started as associate program director, which is like thanks. Here's some complaints, and but Dan's still doing most of the work. But and so that would be something that I would be most proud of, is like being able to train people to be successful and comfortable enough in this and have a robust enough program to be able to train people in this, to go out there and then basically repeat it. Making it jump obviously is really hard, but like it's to give them that leg up, I think would be huge. And I think we're kind of doing it now. The fellows get exposure and that sort of thing, but it's also like when you're early career doing this, that's so touchy because you're worried about your own success. This isn't a guarantee. These aren't type A lesions, and there's so much that can go wrong. So that's a tough balance.
Wonderful. And what is your recommendation to people? I know there's many fellows now, actually most fellows want to do structural, or peripheral is very popular too. And the complex coronary is probably not I wouldn't call it the highest wanted subspecialty. So what are your thoughts of this? And is this the better way to go? Is this not for everyone, or how do you see that?
Yeah, I think that everyone should have exposure to it. I don't think that everyone needs to do like a 1-year CHIP fellowship, with Manos, but nor is it for everyone. There's a very few people who could keep up, right? But I do think that the skills in some of the concepts are very transferable. You mentioned peripheral, and just the way that you learn to work through problems. I had a senior fellow when I was a general fellow who I was trying to decide, what to do. And one of the things he told me was that, I said, tell me about the program. Like, what did you learn? That sort of thing. He goes, oh, I learned some technical skills, but I really learned how to think. And I was like, what do you mean you learned how to think? And he goes, I learned how to organize my mind and work through problems and be able to adapt. And the technical skills kind of come, and everybody sort of reaches like some level of technical proficiency. Some people are really gifted, some people, but everybody has a baseline level of technical proficiency. But learning how to plan and think through a case and then sort of emotionally and cognitively adjust and that sort of thing is the thing that you should be focusing on. And that is what I learned the most. And so I thought that was like the most profound comment. At the time I was like, oh, wow, that's really impressive. And then when I lived through that, that's when I understood what he was talking about. And I still think it's like the most 100% true thing. And that I think is transferable to so many other things, no matter what you do. If you do end up doing mostly structural work or whatever, the cognitive process of being a chip and high risk in CTO operator, I think is like very special. And that I think is the most important. And it's also one that's really difficult to teach. You kind of have to model it, right? It's, and you could talk about some of these things, but it's something that needs to be modeled too. So.
And you're right. And this is not a journey that has an end. It's an ongoing process, and everyone can get better no matter how good they are to start with. And as we've seen, for many other great operators. So if you had to give some advice for the people who are starting now and they're ready to get out there, or they're finishing their fellowship or starting their fellowship or early career, what would you advise them? What are the key things to become good, skilled operators in CTO complex PCI?
Yeah. So I was told by a couple of people when I was getting ready to kind of go out there on my own that during my first year, I should probably just lay low and really kind of start off slow, do a few easy cases, and just kind of keep my head down, not have any complications. And I think that is like the worst advice possible. And the reason for that is because you need to have a mindset of constant growth, and that sort of like stifles that growth. There's some truth to it. You need to be wise, and you need to go about things the right way, especially when you're starting in a new place and you're coming out of fellowship. And when I say be wise, it means that like asking colleagues to sort of tackle these cases with you, talk about them with the heart team. Don't go rogue on these things, but you have a set of skills that you're trained for. And one of my concerns is that people hear this advice, and what they do is they get into like very conservative, like non-growth patterns, like right away. And then it turns out that you kind of get comfortable, and then you can kind of get into this rut where you're not sort of taking on these challenging cases because you've laid low for a little while. And I've seen this in a few people. But if you say, this is what I'm trained for, these are the skills I have, this is what I'm going to do in year one to continue and grow and develop these skills. But I also recognize that I am very junior and I'm new to this group, so I'm going to go about it in X, Y, Z ways. Then I think that's the smartest way. So I guess that's my advice, is to be like circumspect but not shy away from the skills that you have, and starting right away to continue to develop those skills.
Perfect. And you're right, this is a fine balance, right? Because probably your first case shouldn't be a JCTO5 failed 4 times by experienced operators. At the same time, if you do type A lesions for the first 2 years, then maybe by the time you get to the complex stuff, maybe you've forgotten how to tackle them.
Right. And not just from a technical aspect. There's a psychological sort of skill of dealing with those cases and of taking on that risk as an attending. And that's like the most difficult transition from being a fellow and, having Manos right there next to you in case something goes wrong. It's ultimately, your responsibility, and then you start off as an attending. But if you've basically been comfortable, right out of the gate for the first year, it delays that transition and makes it more difficult, I think. So, and then I would tell them that, some of the things that I just said, like, making sure that you're co-scrubbing with partners and that sort of thing, if you're going to tackle these complex things early on and going about it the right way. So look for a place where that's possible, where you're not, I know it's not feasible for everybody, but make sure that you're going to have some allies there that are willing to do that with you. And that you're not just going to be off on your own.
Exactly. And in some places the environment may be a little more fertile. Even if there is no maybe organized program, there is the willingness and the desire to support it, versus some other places may not be friendly to start with, in which case it becomes an uphill battle,
Right.
potentially.
Yep.
But again, I think you're absolutely right. Getting the mindset, diving into the cases and making use of what you've learned makes perfect sense down the line.
Yeah.
Well, Brad, again, really very much appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was
Congrats
fun.
on building a great program. Lots of pearls of wisdom for the people to learn. And again, look forward to learning more from you and with you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Manos. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for listening to the Sensei podcast.